We are joined now by Perry Cammack in Washington. He's a fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Hi there, welcome to the broadcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm sure you heard in our piece there that the Arab foreign ministers are united, but at this juncture, what can they do to counter President Trump's decision?
Well, frankly, they're in a real bind. On the one hand, they certainly wish to express solidarity for Palestine and for Palestinian people. Their own publics will be agitating for action. But the challenge they have is they also don't want to jeopardize relations with the United States. And frankly, for most of these foreign ministers, the principal regional challenge right now is not Jerusalem or Israel, it's Iran. So I think what they're trying to do is very delicately thread this needle of expressing outrage, solidarity with the Palestinians, but also not pushing so far that they might undermine their own larger objectives.
Perry, what do you think of these, perceived threats that are coming from Nikki Haley and Donald Trump? Britain joined 13 other members of the UN Security Council to vote in favor of the resolution calling for Trump to rescind his declaration. But he says these moves won't be forgotten. What do these statements mean?
Well, there was an American comedian in the 1980s, Rodney Dangerfield, used to say, "I don't get no respect." And in some ways, it seems that's the fundamental premise of Trump's foreign policy in terms of threatening cutting aid to Pakistan, threatening cutting aid to the Palestinians. It really seems based on more this notion that they don't respect the United States, they don't appreciate our money, without necessarily really tying it to American interests, which I certainly find potentially worrisome.
Britain's Prime Minister restated the UK's position that Jerusalem should ultimately form a shared capital between the Israeli and Palestinian states. This is really unprecedented for the U.S. strongest ally to venture off.
It is, and ultimately, I suspect that we may end up looking at the Jerusalem statement by President Trump last December 6th. Really, the biggest impact may not be on the conflict itself in terms of the Israelis and the Palestinians, but to this point, it seems the main impact may actually be in isolating the Trump administration internationally, both from certainly its adversaries, but from some of its longest-standing friends as well.
The U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley, she's thanking these 64 countries. She was at a gathering with them recently, who she believes actually stood with the U.S. in its decision to recognize Jerusalem. They're promising to cut aid to these other countries. Will they actually do it? Was this a factor in the vote, do you feel like?
Well, that really remains to be seen. Of course, the Trump administration did threaten to cut aid to anyone that voted for the resolution. It's interesting that all of the Arab League countries did, in fact, vote for it unanimously, including some of the biggest aid recipients, such as Jordan and Egypt. So I think these are the big test cases. I suspect that there may be some symbolic cutting, particularly to the Palestinians themselves. But I would be surprised if, for example, U.S. aid to Egypt or Jordan ended up being cutted.
We've only got a few seconds left, but Perry, what is next?
Well, that's the question. I mean, I think what we're seeing right now is that there's a lot of diplomatic posturing, but unfortunately, it's very hard for me to see a way forward in terms of restarting negotiations for a two-state solution. So I suspect that we're really in this period of stasis and uncertainty, which unfortunately opens the door to spoilers. So how that plays out on the ground is very difficult to say, but I think it's going to be a turbulent phase for the peace process going forward.
Well, Perry Cammack, thank you so much for joining us.